Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the new outside area. If you are new to the channel, welcome. Thanks for finding us. I hope you're doing well. I hope you enjoy this video. If you could give us a sub and a thumbs up and all that fun stuff, it would be hugely appreciated. Shout out to our patrons over on Patreon. There's a link in the description of this video where you can sign up for that. We got a new one just today. It's such a huge help to the channel. It helps me buy all the movies that you see reviewed here. All the money goes back into the channel. It's a fun community in there. So thank you so much. What are we here to talk about today? I'm really excited. It's Police Story 3, Supercop, the standalone Eureka Blu-ray release. This is the 30th anniversary of this film, as I realized I was watching it yesterday or the day before. This was released in 1992. So 30 years later, here we have the Eureka Blu-ray release. This is coming out September 26th of 2022. This is a Region B release. I'm going to focus on the Blu-ray release and reviewing that in this video. I'm going to do a separate video where I talk about the film. I already have like a title for the video. I know what I'm going to be talking about. I'm really excited to record that as well. The film stars obviously Jackie Chan, who you can see right there on the cover, and it co-stars Michelle Yeoh, and we also have Yoon Wah, we have Kenneth Sang, we have Bill Tung, and Calvin Wong is in this film. It's an incredible cast. It was directed by Stanley Tong, and it's just an incredible movie. So to give you a basic overview up front, if you want to just know what I think about this and get on with your day and not watch the whole video, this is a 5-star release. I don't rate releases, I don't rate movies, but like this is a 5 out of 5 movie for me. This is a 5 out of 5 Blu-ray release for me. I would go so far as to say that this is my Blu-ray release of the year so far. Now, that being said, I have not watched this one yet, which may very well take the place of that. This is the 4K Police Story set with the trilogy, but as far as releases I have watched so far, especially standalone releases of individual films, favorite release of the year, 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, whatever you want to give it. I would also go so far as to say this is one of my new favorite Jackie Chan standalone individual film Blu-ray releases. I think it's just as good as any of the other releases we've had recently, and I would also say that this is the definitive standalone edition of this film as of now. Because I can't think of a single thing you would want on a release of this movie that is not on here. You have an interview with Jackie Chan, you have an interview with Michelle Yeoh, you have 3 interviews with Stanley Tong, the director, there's an interview with Ken Lo, there are a number of other incredible bonus features, which I am going to be talking about. There is a limited edition slipcase, there's a limited edition booklet with a really great essay in it, there are postcards in there, and there's 2 expert commentary tracks. Mike Leader, who does a commentary with Arna Venema on here, was on the set of this film. He knows like every single person who is in this movie, who was involved behind the scenes. He tells stories about being on the set of this film. He knows where they filmed literally every single scene. It's really mind-blowing and incredible to have that commentary track as a resource. So I'm going to get into more details about the bonus features and everything else that's involved on this release in a second. I'm going to show you the physical aspects of the release first, but what I want to say up front here, if you're not going to watch the whole video, I don't think this movie has ever looked or sounded better on a home video release. Now, I do have to say, obviously, I didn't watch the 4K version yet, which probably does look better because it's in 4K, but I have seen this movie on a film print. About 10 years ago, the Academy, which is the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, who does the Oscars and everything, they created a brand new film print of the extended Hong Kong cut of the. I should say that the Hong Kong cut and the US cut are both on here in HD as well, and it has the dub from the American cut that has Jackie and Michelle doing their own voices. So like really what is on here that you would like? There's nothing that's missing from this. Like there's not a single negative thing that I can say about this release. Like they didn't have this. It's basically perfect. So I've seen this film on a film print, brand new, pristine, freshly made film print, and I didn't notice a major difference. No, obviously that's a much bigger screen, right, where I saw it in the theater. So like, it's a very different experience. But this looks mind blowing. There are so many scenes in this film where I just couldn't believe what I was looking at, what they've done with this remaster, the clarity of it, the naturalness of the colors. Nothing here looks fake or artificially like messed with or any of that stuff. Like, it just looks and sounds incredible. In the very beginning of the movie, you know, Jackie rides in on the motorcycle and there's the shot of his foot putting down the kickstand. And it was like I could reach out and untie his shoe. Like, the clarity of it is like you're in the space with those people. And there's like rain in this movie, there's fog, there's all these different locations, there's so much texture in this film, and all of it looks phenomenal. Like, you can feel the heat when they're in Malaysia, you can feel the coldness of the rain when they're in China. Like, the texture of the film it's incredible. It really, really is. Like, this was like, for all the times I've seen this movie, for all the different presentations I've seen it on, this really felt like a revelatory experience for me and truly mind-blowing. So let me show you the physical release here. So here's Darren Wheeling did the artwork here. Here's the front. And this is all the, like, there's so much stuff on this release. That's all the stuff that's on this release. And then we pop it open here. And I really like this. This is like a variation, you know, on like the classic cover that was on like the old Hong Kong DVD and stuff like that, which I have. And there's that. And there's a slight break in the case here, in case you noticed that while you're watching the video. That did not happen in shipping. That is not Eureka's fault. That happened in my closet. I keep my movies in my closet so my kids don't get at them, and it somehow just, I don't know, it dinged something in the closet. So that's not Eureka's fault. So when you open it up, you get the in my over-eagerness, I took all the stuff on the inside out before showing it to you. So there's the disc with obviously the most classic of classic stunts hanging from the helicopter. And then there's the booklet there. And then you pop the booklet out, and underneath that, there's the postcards. And I'm going to show you that in a second, but let me just show you the reversible cover art first, because it is that old school DVD cover art that I was mentioning. So there you go. You can kind of see that. And so you can reverse that if you want, but I don't know. I like this. I like the flames licking the sky and the heightened drama of that artwork. So here are the postcards. Let me show you these. They got Jackie and Maggie Cheung. Obviously, Maggie Cheung is back in the film playing May. There's Jackie. And oh, there's stuff on the back of these I should show you as well. There's like little, kind of like little miniature versions of different like posters and stuff like that. So there you go. And so the front is kind of glossy, and then the back is like a matte print. Like different textures on the front and the back there, which is pretty cool. And then there's this, absolutely classic. I mean, this is basically like a Michelle Yeoh, Jackie Chan buddy cop movie, which is really one of the things that for me makes it so incredible and amazing. So James Oliver wrote the essay here. It's a really interesting essay. He talks about the American cut of the film versus the Hong Kong cut. And I am going to do a video on that, but that might be a Patreon exclusive video, because I've got like 4 videos I wanted to about just this movie, and I've got the whole 4K set. So I'm like, I can't put like 65 videos about the Police Story series on YouTube. So I'm going to put some of them as Patreon exclusive. So I did a video on the Japanese cut of First Strike, which I have a copy of in Patreon, and that did really well, and people were really appreciative that I did that. Like, I reviewed the movie, but I also talked about the differences between the various cuts and stuff like that. So that's in Patreon now, and people really liked having that as an exclusive. So I might do that as well for discussing the 2 cuts of this film. But so, like I said, he talks about kind of the different cuts of the movie. He talks about Michelle Yeoh and how, you know, she had retired and then she got divorced and then she came back and she was friends with Stanley Tong. So it was his idea to kind of put her in this movie. And he talks about how Stanley Tong got recruited and what his dynamic was like with Jackie Chan. And, you know, how Michelle Yeoh is really like the first woman to ever be like an equal to Jackie Chan and to like go like toe to toe for him with stunts, with fight scenes, have like almost equal screen time, like that kind of stuff, and how that was like a really big thing. And he talks about like the international success of this film, like great photos too, of this film, and like how much money it made around the world. And it was a big hit in the US, and it, you know, the amount of money that it made in the US was indicative of the fact that people beyond diehard Hong Kong cinema and Jackie Chan fans were interested in these movies and would go to the theaters and see them if they were accessible, because they're just such fantastic action films. And so there you go. That's the poster I was talking about there. That's on the Hong Kong DVD that I have of this film. There we go. I was looking at my versions of Supercop after I got this, because I was like, how many copies of this movie do I have? I think I have 7 different versions of this movie, and actually I think I have 8. I have 8 individual releases of it, because I have 2 copies of the Hong Kong DVD, but I think I have 7 versions of this movie. So I'm going to talk about the bonus material. I'm going to leave the commentaries for the end because I'm going to talk in more detail about the commentaries. But so like I said, there's two cuts of the movie on here. The 96-minute Hong Kong theatrical cut, which is a brand new restoration from the film elements. And then there's the HD presentation of the alternate US version, which is 91 minutes long. It's got the original Cantonese mono audio as well as an optionate alternate Cantonese audio track featuring the original unaltered sound effects, the brand new Cantonese Dolby Atmos surround sound audio. So there's a ton of audio options on here. I just watched the original Cantonese mono. I did switch on the other ones just to see what they were like, but I stuck with the original Cantonese mono. And then there's the classic English dub track, the brand new, and then there's the, the US version with the option of the American English dub track, including Jackie Chan and Michelle Yeoh voicing their own characters. Or you have the film's original Cantonese audio that you can choose to put onto that alternate track. So that's a really cool thing that they did there, to take the Cantonese audio track and to edit it to fit onto the HD version of that US cut. Because a lot of people, James Oliver talks about this in his essay, the US cut of this film is not bad, and people will get mad about it because it leaves out important stuff from the film. I'm not going to argue with that. I do prefer the Hong Kong cut, but you know, for the first 15 years that I was seeing this movie, probably I was seeing the US version, and it's not like totally butchered like other Jackie Chan movies are. And James Oliver mentions that Jackie Chan actually had approval of the US cut of this and it may have been involved in it. So it wasn't just like, you know, Harvey Weinstein in his office being like, get that shit out of here, get that shit out of here. It was a more hands-on, I think, process with Jackie, and less was cut out. Obviously only 5 to 6 minutes that was cut out, as opposed to some of these other movies where it's like 10, 15, 20 minutes taken out of them. And so that's an interesting thing that he says there, but it's also interesting to have these cuts side by side. And like I said, I will be doing a separate video about that. So to get into the bonus material, there are the interviews. I wrote down the lengths of the interviews. So I am not going to go into detail on the interviews with Jackie, Michelle, Stanley Kwan, Ken Lo, any of that stuff. But suffice it to say, they're fantastic interviews. Stanley Kwan is a really interesting speaker. He's very soft-spoken. He's very intelligent. He's very articulate. And he has a really good memory. And he really just talks about the process of making these films, what it's like being on the set, like his artistic approach, creative approach, like that kind of stuff, collaborating with Jackie and Michelle. Michelle Yeoh talks a lot about, I mean, her career, doing the stunts, like how the ballet figured into, she trained in ballet, like at a very high level. And so she talks about that, and she talks about working with Jackie and coming back to movies after being retired for a bit, and like all of that. And Jackie he's always interesting to listen to because he talks a lot about the stunts and he talks about how every time you get to make a sequel, it's a privilege because it means that people like the previous movie enough that you get to do another one. And so he feels a lot of responsibility in making sequels because the fact that the existence of the sequel is indicative of a fan culture means that you have a responsibility to the fans to do justice to what they loved about the films in the first place. It's interesting to hear him talk about that. And then Ken Lo is a really interesting person. He's been in so many of these films. He's such an incredible stunt performer, martial artist, and to hear his take on everything. The Jackie interview is 19 minutes and 21 seconds. The Michelle Yeoh interview is 23 minutes and 12 seconds. The Stanley Tong interviews are 19 minutes, 33 seconds, 17 minutes, 16 seconds, and 31 minutes and 7 seconds. So there's over an hour worth of interviews just with him. The Ken Lo is 21 minutes and 45 seconds. So then you have a John Kreng interview. John Kreng he was in The Master with Jet Li, which I've talked about before, because he has 2 amazing interviews on the 88 film's release of the Blu-ray release of The Master. And he has a really great memory, like working with Jet Li, what it was like doing martial arts against him, getting kicked in the head by him, like really cool stuff like that. So he was actually interviewed by Frank Zheng. Frank's not in the interview, but the questions that Frank asks like appear on the screen. So the video is kind of divided into segments, which is really cool. And so he talks about how he got into the movies in the first place, what his background is, doing fight choreography and stuff like that. And he talks about how, like, the helicopter stunt, like he knows behind the scenes information about how they had like a harness kind of rigging Jackie to the ladder in case his grip slipped and stuff like that. And he talks about Michelle Yeoh and like the motorcycle stunt where she jumps from the train onto the motorcycle. And he talks about what makes Michelle Yeoh so unique. He talks about her accuracy, like the first time he saw her in I think it was Magnificent Warriors or Royal Warriors. And he talks about a specific stunt she does and how incredibly accurate her movement is. Like, she has to go from one place to the other place to hit a mark to get the shot, and it's one continuous shot, and there's like a jump and a flip involved, and it's just like so precise and pinpoint. And it's really interesting to hear his perspective on not only this film but also what makes Jackie and Michelle Yeoh such incredible performers in terms of the stunts, the martial arts and stuff like that. So then there are 2 bonus features on here from Crazy from Kong. So if you don't know, Crazy from Kong, Arne Venema is, I don't know if he founded it, I think he did, and he's like one of the kind of like the heads of it, but it's like this kind of collective of people who live in Hong Kong. Also involves Michael Chan, who I've interviewed on my channel, also involves Joe Farello, who I've interviewed on my channel. So like people I know who are really, really cool people. And they made 2 bonus features that are on this release. One is the super violent, let me read you the full name of it, the Ultra Violent Jackie Chan video games. So this is 11 minutes and 11 seconds long, and it's a documentary where they talk about these Japanese video games that were made. Jackie Chan partnered with this Japanese video game company in anticipation of the film Thunderbolt. And they were going to put money into the funding of Thunderbolt, and he did these video games, and they're like Mortal Kombat style video games, and they're like really brutal and violent, and they've gotten footage from these video games for this documentary, and so you can see the gameplay and like the blood and the brutality of it. And Mike Leader's in it. And I think Thorsten Nicholson, is that his name? The guy who played the villain in Thunderbolt is actually interviewed in this documentary. And because I think he's in video game too. He plays a character. And so he talks about about the video game and how he got cast in Thunderbolt. And he had been in My Father is a Hero, the Jet Li movies, which is one of my favorite Jet Li movies, which I believe is directed by Corey Yuen, if I'm not mistaken. And it's just a really, really cool documentary that, like I said, has all this footage from the game so that you can see them and how I guess Mike Leader says they were like bootlegged at some point in the West, but they were never officially released because they're so off-brand for Jackie that it was kind of like too much to put them out, basically. And then there's a locations documentary that Arne Venema does, 11 minutes and 21 seconds. There's a location from this covers the entire Police Story trilogy. And he goes all over Hong Kong. And one of the things that I loved about it, because I'm a location junkie, I talk about this a lot. I just love seeing the city, any city in a film, really, but especially Hong Kong, because I love these movies so much. And so what Arne I guess the people who edited and put this video together do is they have a subway map of Hong Kong. And for each location, they zoom in on the subway station so you can contextualize it within like the greater framework of Hong Kong. It's a really, really cool little detail that really helps you feel like you're there. So they go to like, obviously the mall where they do the pole slide in Police Story 1, the playground from Police Story 2, like all these different locations. And it's not just like, oh, look, here's where they filmed this scene. Like in the playground fight, for instance, Arno walks through every part of the playground. It's like, here's the swing set where they did this. You can see it looks different now because of this. Here's like the slide and like the jungle gym area where they filmed this. And if you look behind me, you can see these 2 reference points that are in the movie. So you can see I'm standing in the same spot. And like, there's even one part where he's like, this scene in the movie was shot here, but our shot looks very different because in the movie they use these anamorphic lenses from Italy that were very rare in Hong Kong at the time, and all the cinematographers came to see them, and like so many cool details and so many cool locations and shots. And there's actually one location from the films that does not exist anymore, is in the process of being torn down or something like that, and they got there to film it just before it was torn down. And so like they're essentially preserving history by making this documentary, which was so cool, I thought. Okay, then we have what is I have to say, no offense to anyone else who is involved in this release, but my favorite thing on here, which is, there's trailers and TV spots, I should also say, which are really fun. At the very bottom here, it says outtakes, a huge selection of no good shots from the film. Now, on other releases, the no good shots have been like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. And it really is just outtakes. Like it wasn't as good as the one that they did, or like, someone started laughing or like missed a mark or whatever. This is 51 minutes long. And it's basically like a behind the scenes fly on the wall documentary. Like there are shots that are like outtakes that are no good shots, like stunts gone wrong, that kind of stuff, but there's a huge amount of behind the scenes footage too. Like in the scene where they have the drug dealers village, and there's like, they're firing the rocket launchers and stuff like that, and all this stuff is on fire. You see like Stanley Tong and Jackie Chan like directing the crew with the hose, being like, put out the fire over there, and you see like how they made the fire, and you see like Jackie behind the camera and Stanley Tong behind the camera talking about shit. Like there's no audio, so you can't hear what they're saying, but I mean, it's not totally silent, but it's not like, there's not like audio of them being like, hey, let's do this, you know what I mean? You don't hear what's being said, but you can see it. There is audio. But you can see the process of making the film. So in addition to the outtakes, the no good shots, the messed up stunts, which gives you really great insight into what it's like to make a movie like this with all these stunts and having to do multiple takes and stuff like that, you see what they're actually doing behind the scenes making the film. And as someone like myself who's really interested in the craft, the process of filmmaking, it is so cool to see that. 51 minutes long, like I said. So I highly recommend not skipping that. Like, this is a very small item just at the very bottom here, but like, check it out. I promise you, it's amazing and it's worth it. So to talk about the commentary tracks, which I'm really excited to tell you about. Like I said, Mike Leader, he knows one of his first friends when he moved to Hong Kong was Calvin Wong, who was in this film. He plays like the Pierre character, who's kind of like one of the lackeys of the Kenneth Tsang character, who's like the big bad guy. And he talks all about that, like what it was like to be friends with him, what he was like in real life. Like he liked to do pranks on people, and he was like this kind of outlandish and weird dude. And it's just like really cool. I'm not kidding you when I say every person in this movie Mike Leader knows, and he knows something about. There's a guy who's in this movie about whom there was a biopic made, directed by Herman Yao, who directed like Ebola Syndrome and like Untold Story, and produced by Andy Lau, right? So it's like this just guy in this movie who's in one scene who I wouldn't really have thought that much about while watching this scene. And Mike Leader's like, oh, by the way, there's a movie about that guy. And I'm just looking at my notes here. The mansion that the villain lives in, they talk about who owns it. Like the actual owner of that mansion, where it is, all the other movies that have been shot there for like villain locations and stuff like that. Arna, actually, Arna's a filmmaker, and so he talks about like the colors that are used in the movie in certain scenes and like visually what they're doing, Stanley Tong's directing style, like that kind of stuff. Mike talks about the real life relationship between Michelle Yeoh and Jackie Chan and how it is reflected in the relationship that you see between them on the screen. He talks about Michelle Yeoh's sense of humor. He actually talks about how Michelle Yeoh and Stanley Tong first met years before this film was made and how they became friends and how she like came back into the focus. This was her first movie after she basically unretired after she got divorced. So he knows that whole story, and it's so cool to hear. It's not, it's just a really great, they're so funny together. It's like hanging out with your friends. Like they're so natural with one another. They have such a great rapport, but they know so much. Now, Frank and FJ DeSanto, I love them. I've interviewed Frank multiple times on the channel. I've met with FJ DeSanto before, and he gives me all these old DVDs. So when I said I have 7 copies of Supercop, probably at least 2 of them were given to me by him. He's such a great guy. And FJ, one of the things that FJ does, because he and Frank did commentaries for all 3 of the films for the 4K box set, not to harp on that too much, but show it off again, but I'm really excited about it. And they did them all in one day, which is really interesting because FJ, FJ DeSanto he's like a TV showrunner. He's a film producer. He's a writer. He's worn a lot of different hats over the years. So he has a lot of insight into storytelling and process and stuff like that. And he talks a lot about this film in continuity with the other 2 films, how it references the first film a lot, what it does really well as a sequel, why it's so successful, why he thinks it's a much better sequel than the second film. And then he also talks about First Strike and how that film doesn't fit, even though it is technically part of the series, it doesn't fit in the continuity. And he talks about why that is and why he feels that this really deserves to be thought of as a trilogy, these first 3 films, and that First Strike, even though it is technically part of the series, is actually something else in his mind. And it's really interesting. They talk about the James Bondification of Jackie Chan, which I've actually talked about multiple times on this channel before, and how he was seeking more of an international audience going into the 90s with this film especially, and going outside of Hong Kong to all these different locations. But they also talk about how this film doesn't do that thing where they just dub everyone in English. Like people are speaking their own languages. There's appreciation of all the cultures that they go to. Like really interesting, in-depth insight into this film that I really appreciated. Frank talks about actually, so it's funny, a lot of people think that this was the first sync sound film ever shot for Hong Kong cinema. Sync sound means you're recording the sound on the set instead of dubbing it later. And Frank says that's not actually true. And he talks about the history of sync sound with Hong Kong going back to the 50s. It's really interesting because I never knew any of that. Really, really cool stuff there. So I highly recommend checking the commentary track out for that. And then Frank also talks about something I thought was really interesting is, there's a large section of this film that's filmed in Mainland China. And Frank talks about seeing this movie, I think he saw it in San Francisco, Chinatown, And you know, Frank being from Hong Kong and then being part of the expat community, and the sometimes very uneasy relationship between that community and mainland China. And it's really interesting to hear him talk about people's reactions to seeing that. It's really interesting, and I won't spoil what he talks about and things like that, but they also talk about how this really is kind of like a double lead buddy cop movie between Jackie Chan and Michelle Yeoh, and how interesting that is. They talk about Yun Hwa's career, because, you know, he's in this film, and how like his evolution of playing like villains and kind of like just just like silly stuff from scene to scene. They talk about both them and Arna Venom and Mike Leader talk about Mars. You know, Mars is in this film, who's like he's in like all the Jackie stuff, and he's also in the first two movies as a totally different character, and it's kind of jarring. I never really thought about that before. I was just like, oh, it's Mars. He's in all these movies, but they're like, you know, he's like Jackie's friend in Hong Kong in the first two movies, and he's a villain in mainland China. And did he fall on hard times and get arrested and sent to like a prison camp, or is it a different character? It's just funny little banter like that. That's a pretty good overview. I don't want this video to go on too long. And like I said, I am going to talk about the movie itself in a separate video. This is the Supercop. So I should say, I got chastised in the comments for calling it Supercop. Hello? Police Story 3 Supercop, excuse me. Blu-ray release from Eureka Entertainment. It's my release of the year so far. It's one of my new, probably 5 favorite Jackie Chan releases. I'm so hyped on it. I had so much fun watching it. I highly encourage you to go out and get it. It's just such a great release. It's such a great movie. I loved it. My name is Will. This is Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. I thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.